Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our Western Australian Stand By What You Sell webinar tonight. This webinar has been organised in partnership with Integrity Systems Company and the Western Australian Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. So my name's Cherie Young. I'm the Communications Manager at Integrity Systems Company and will be facilitating the webinar tonight and taking you through what we're going to cover. We've got a few speakers for you tonight. So before we get going, I'll just give you a bit of a run through of what we're going to cover tonight. So we'll start off with an overview of the Livestock Production Assurance program and the requirements of that program with Elizabeth Bradley, who's the Quality and Compliance Manager at Integrity Systems Company. Then I'll come in and give you all a bit of an update on the eNVD system and where that is at. Then Elizabeth will come back and give a bit of a rundown on the NLIS system. Then we've got Andrew Longbottom, who's a project officer of sustainability and biosecurity with the WA government, and he's going to give you a bit of a rundown on sheep and goat eID implementation and activities that are going on around that at the moment for WA. And then we've got David Slade, a sheep producer from the Mount Barker region who has been using eID technology on his flock for the last 5 years, I believe. So David is here, will join us at the end for a bit of a Q&A just to go through the benefits and value he's getting out of the use of eID and just his thoughts on that. So it's quite a bit to cover. We've got a Q&A box in the bottom of the screen where you are more than welcome to pop your questions in. We've got Integrity Systems Company representatives answering questions in the background, and also Andrew Longbottom will be able to answer sort of more government related questions as well. In the coming days after this webinar is over, we'll send you all out an email that'll have the recording of this webinar, plus the Q&A transcript, so all the questions you've asked in registration phase and tonight, and the answers, and any other resources that we've got that we'll be covering off tonight. So you can keep your eye out for that email that will come in the coming days. But yes, please pop your questions in as they come to mind, and the team are here to answer them. So that is basically the run of the evening. So I guess next I will pass over to Elizabeth, who's going to take you through the Integrity Systems Company LPA program and what's involved in that. So I'll just pass you over to Elizabeth now. Thank you.
Thanks, Cherie, and hi everyone. It's nice to be here. So just to put you into context, in case you're not aware, Integrity Systems Company, we're part of Meat Livestock Australia, and we provide the products and services for the integrity system within the red meat industry. So that's sort of where we sit, if there was ever kind of any queries around that, just as a refresher there for you. But as Cherie mentioned, tonight we're going to be focusing on the integrity systems that we have in place for our red meat industry. So the key components to these being the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA, which is where you get access to your national vendor declarations, or the NVDs, and how it works in conjunction with the National Livestock Identification System, or the NLIS. And that's all around the property identification codes, identifying animals and recording those movements in the database. So these two programs work together to basically provide assurance to who we sell our meat to around food safety. They also help us with traceability, which is really important when it comes to biosecurity. And there's also animal welfare components within LPA as well. So tonight I'm going to be running you through the LPA requirements as well as the NLIS requirements, especially around some information around eIDs. So just as a general reminder before we jump into the requirements around LPA, LPA is an accreditation. So when you join the program, you commit to adhering to the LPA standards and rules. You need to re-accredit every 3 years to remain in the program and have access to the LPA NVDs. Within that, you also need to manage your on-farm practices in accordance with the standards, which is what I'm going to run you through shortly, and around all of those requirements and things that you need to do to demonstrate that compliance. And the other thing with LPA is you can get selected for an audit. So audits are really important because, one, it's an education tool if you're not quite sure what's going on and what you should be doing. The other part is it actually helps provide verification to our customers, both domestically and internationally, that our systems are working. So it helps give that verification that we need to say that our systems are robust and are providing that assurance that we need. And that's really important, especially when it comes down to Australia's global access to other countries and being able to sell the majority of our meat overseas. So really important we can provide that assurance around food safety and meeting our customer requirements for our red meat. So within LPA, the LPA standards are the things that you need to do or demonstrate in order to meet the program. There were 7 elements is what we call them, which are up on screen now at the moment. So these are all around food safety, biosecurity, livestock transactions and movements, and your animal welfare requirements. So the first 4 generally focus on food safety requirements. Then we've got the NVDs and the NLIS requirements, as well as welfare and biosecurity. So I'm going to walk you through each of these and just give you some tips on what you should be doing and what documentation and records you need to be keeping in order to be compliant with LPA. So first cab off the rank is the property risk assessment. So it's not as complicated as it sounds. The starting point of this is it's around identifying contamination risks on your property and then just minimising livestock being exposed to them. So this is all around food safety. So it could be old chemical dip sites, it could be batteries, old machinery, your rubbish dump, things like that are on your property where if livestock got into it, potentially it could leave a residue in the food, or potentially it could be a physical contaminant from, say, broken wire or buckshot or something of that nature. So it's around looking at your property, having a clear idea what the risks are, and then just avoiding livestock becoming exposed to those areas. And you just document that in a table format. So risk, how you control it. And it's a good idea to also have that on a farm map as well, just so it's quite clear what's on your property and then what sort of measures you have in place to reduce those risks. The other part of this requirement is around also having a system in place in case livestock do become contaminated. It's not a deal breaker. We just need to be able to communicate that on the LPA NVD that those animals have had a contamination, so the seller or the buyer knows that those livestock have been contaminated. So it might sound a bit scary, but I promise you risk assessments aren't as scary in LPA's work health and safety ones potentially. So give it a go, and it doesn't have to be onerous. The second requirement around food safety is safe and responsible animal treatments. This one has, again, a lens on food safety because if you're giving a drug treatment to an animal, it could leave a residue in the meat tissues at processing, which could cause a chemical residue, and that's no good for food safety requirements and MRLs and things like that. It's also making sure the animal is getting an effective dose of that medicine, so it's actually doing its job properly. So the thing around safe and responsible animal treatments is around reducing that contamination risk or residues being in the meat at processing and being able to communicate any withholding periods or export slaughter intervals on that NVD when you do sell those animals. The other important thing around animal treatments is the use of hormonal growth promotants or HGPs, because these are really big market stoppers. So the European Union, China, and the UK now, they don't accept red meat that's been treated with HGPs. And because we use them in Australia, if you are using them, you need to have clear declarations on your NVDs that those animals have been treated, that you've identified them, and because they are controlled substances, that you have a really good handle on purchase and reconciliation and use of those controlled substances. So really important around record keeping for HGPs in particular. Record keeping in animal treatments, of course, is very important, given that you need to have records to back up those NVD declarations. So any animal treatment that you're giving, the person administering it should be at least knowledgeable and competent or know what they're doing, so they're doing it correctly. You also need to keep really good records of that treatment. So everything from what you treated them with, who was treated, also the batch numbers, the expiry date of the chemical. A tip there is you could keep the label, take a photo of it, Also the date you treated them, the withhold or the export slaughter interval, and person administering the treatment. All really important, especially if there's an issue with that product and you need to know what animals you've treated with it. The other things around animal treatments is having access to the APVMA's withhold and export slaughter intervals is a key one as well, in case that label doesn't have it as well. They're a good resource to go and check out. So really important tips around that and having those records available in case you do get audited. And there are LPA templates available in many different formats if you need help with your record keeping system. The next requirement in LPA is, again, got a lens on food safety, and it's around treating your pasture or stock feeds or basically anything in the environment around the livestock. So you might bring in feed and that might have been treated with a chemical, and you need to know that so that if you're not feeding it to your livestock while it's in a withholding period. If you are using chemicals on your property, so you're spraying weeds or pasture or whatever it might be, again, that can cause a chemical residue if they eat it while it's in a withholding period. So it's all around minimising their exposure to that while it's in a withhold, and then keeping good records of that chemical use. So making sure anyone who is applying chemicals has done a proper training course as well, ensuring that you have good records of those chemical treatments, again, batch where you've treated, withholding periods, expiry dates and things like that of the actual chemicals you're using. It's a good idea to have your chemicals stored away from livestock access as well, because we don't want them getting in there and getting contaminated accidentally. For incoming feed products as well, it is important that you understand if it is being treated with a chemical. Sometimes grain gets treated as well, as we know. So again, things about getting a commodity vendor declaration for that, any incoming feed is important, so you're aware if it isn't in a withholding period and not feeding it to livestock, or being aware if you are, so you can manage that on that outgoing NVD as well. So there's some tricks around that. We also have record keeping templates for all of those things, and asking your suppliers for copies of those commodity vendor declarations and their treatment history. The next requirement in LPA is around preparing livestock for dispatch or getting them ready for transport. So this is really where you're assembling them, you're checking them over to make sure that they're fit to load, fit for the journey that they're about to embark on. This is important because it's around the welfare. People can see animals on trucks and, you know, that's got the community expectation that those animals are fit for that journey. We have the MLA's Fit to Load guide, which talks around lameness, sick animals, animals that aren't fit to load. So it's really important. If you don't have a copy, you can absolutely get a copy on our website, on the MLA website as well. And it's important that you're filling out those NVDs to back up the details around that fitness check as well. Having good records around your transporter, if they're reputable, if you trust them, if you're looking at the trucks to make sure they're in good condition. All of those things contribute to making sure that the journey is going to be suitable for those animals and vice versa. So that one's actually really well done in LPA, so it's a commendable one. The next requirement I'll talk about is biosecurity. So biosecurity, as it lends its name to, is around biological security, so keeping out weeds, diseases and pests. On-farm biosecurity requirements in LPA is around having a documented biosecurity plan. Within LPA, it's around managing anything coming onto your property and it bringing a risk with it. So making sure that you're not trying to let things come onto your property that have contamination, and then that contamination becoming a pest, a weed, or disease that gets established. And as we know, something like foot and mouth disease could very much do that. So it's around monitoring as well. It's around having the controls you can have in place that are suitable and you know, practical. With the biosecurity plans, again, there's loads of templates available. LPA has one. There's one from Animal Health Australia as well. They generally all cover the same sorts of things. So it's choose your own template if you don't have one already. It's really important to sort of do it. With the biosecurity plans, you can use any template. It will be accepted in LPA. It's really just important that you have one and you understand it and it's been implemented on your property. So things within your biosecurity plan is around, you know, vehicles, animals, people coming onto your property and how you control those risks. So having good fences, having signs up, having a visitor sign-in process, monitoring incoming livestock once they arrive onto your property and quarantining them for a period of time to monitor them for disease. So it's all these really practical things around managing incoming things that you can actually control. So other tips around biosecurity, I know there's loads of them, but you know, feral animal management, you can do what you can do, you know, but being aware of what's around as well, what your neighbours are experiencing, and ultimately monitoring your livestock and monitoring your property for those signs and symptoms. Also knowing what to do if you do suspect something's not quite right, so who to contact. So your animal health officer, your emergency animal disease hotline, your vet, asking for help. It's better to ask the question and it be nothing than not ask it and it actually cause an emergency animal disease outbreak. So some practical tips and tricks there is really have a read through of the templates. They really kind of help you figure it out. We also do have loads of resources in previous webinars and videos on how to do it as well. The next requirement in LPA is animal welfare. So animal welfare in LPA surrounds around the Australian standards and guidelines for animal welfare. So they're species specific. So if you've just got cattle, you just need the cattle ones. If you've got sheep, it's the sheep, and if you've got goats, it's the goats. These standards are nationally agreed, and they have standards for which must be adhered to, and then guidelines which set out how you might achieve the standards. So they're a good document to read through and understand, and that's actually a requirement of LPA. So one, having a copy of those standards on hand, two, having a good understanding of them, and you can do that specifically through doing the LPA training module on animal welfare as well. That's available in your LPA account, which is also free to do as many times as you like. And the third one, or the fourth one in this space, is around making sure that any staff that are doing husbandry practices or things that involve livestock in general, especially around those painful procedures, that they've been trained in those animal standards and guidelines as well. So we're embedding that animal welfare requirements through your business and keeping records of that training. So yeah, that's the animal welfare guidelines and standards. And the next requirement in LPA is around livestock transactions and movements. And so this one is where we start talking about NVDs, animal identification, and the NLIS requirements. So it sort of brings the two systems together in that LPA and NLIS come together. So this is around completing your NVDs when you're selling or moving livestock, getting copies of NVDs when you're buying livestock in, and also making sure you've got animals identified with their NLIS tag, and recording movements in the NLIS database when you buy livestock onto your property. So they're the key components around this one. When completing NVDs, it's really important that you answer all the questions and that it's as accurate as it possibly can be. NVDs need to have records to back up those declarations. So, you know, have they ever been treated with HGP? If you tick no and your records say yes, you know, it's got to line up. The same thing with withholds, with vaccines, all of the questions should have records to back up what that declaration says. So that's sort of how it fits together. And NVDs are really important because they provide the information that the processors need in order to make decisions about where to send that meat or those live animals, if that's the case. So important things around invalid NVDs, they do happen, and they happen quite frequently. So when you can't read them, when the questions aren't answered properly or at all, where questions are answered both yes and no, or it's not signed, common issues that make those NVDs, those legal declarations, not quite right. And this is something that we've been trying to tackle with using the electronic national vendor declarations, or the eNVD, because it actually stops people from not being able to answer all the questions and fixes that legibility issue. But I'm just going to pause here, and I'm going to hand back to Sheree, who's going to run you through some of the excitements that we have around the eNVD at this point in time. So I'll hand back to you, Sheree.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, so Elizabeth's given me a great introduction into digital consignments and eNVDs and the new eNVD app. So I guess the big question is, why is transitioning to digital consignment so important and something that we're really trying to encourage industry to do? There's a few reasons, but I guess the big one is just the challenges that we see, which Elizabeth just touched on, from paper forms and the rate at which the paper forms can go out of date, and you end up, perhaps if you've got books lying around, you perhaps end up filling in a form from an older book, so that creates issues along the supply chain. Then you've got issues around like not being able to read the writing, or just that the paper forms can be torn or lost, or misfiled away, incorrectly completed. So all of this is a big impact across the traceability of the supply of stock through the supply chain, which is obviously really important, and the food safety status there, like just having things not quite filled in correctly, something that we're struggling and trying to overcome by developing the eNVD system. So I guess the paper is one thing, and then at the end of that, you also then have the internet connectivity challenges. But I guess first of all, to try and shift everyone onto a digital platform, Integrity Systems Company went off and created the eNVD system in 2018, which did alleviate a lot of those problems that we've just discussed around paper forms, lost details, incorrect filling out, and hard to read. So you end up with with an easier system. It's easier to read. There's less duplication because the same standard forms can just be repeated along as you go along. So there's many benefits for them. It basically strengthens the robustness of our integrity system to have this information captured digitally all through the supply chain. But with the eNVD system, the web-based system, there was the biggest problem and roadblock was the fact that many people were struggling with their internet connection, particularly where you needed it. So out on the paddocks or down at the yards, wherever you couldn't quite, it just wasn't working. So Integrity Systems Company went away again and came back in March this year with the eNVD app, which is a new platform that builds off, it complements the web system, so the two can work together. So you can start a consignment in the office at home and then finish it down at the yards when you're about to send your stock off. It has the capability that you can use this function that it has built in it to transfer the consignment from one app to another. So just say your transporter is using the app, they come along, there's no internet where you're meeting, you can transfer the data across between the two apps. So that data just stays digitally captured, even if there's no internet. And once you go back into range, the transporter opens the app, it all syncs. So there's just that connectivity challenge was overcome, which is one of the big hurdles that we've had with digital eNVD adoption. And so, there's lots of benefits there. It's also got a lot of a template function in there, so that if you create the same consignment regularly, you can save it as a template and just open it up and create a new consignment off that template. So there's a lot less duplication in your process. This also makes it a lot easier when it comes around to being audited for your LPA, because all your documentation is stored here, and so it's much easier to go through that process as well. So there are a lot of benefits for this system, for the LPA eNVD system. So yes, I think we know that the transition is a big one. And the other big part of getting the eNVD app usage going through the supply chain is working with the supply chain to get it implemented at all the different parts, and that work is going on. There's a lot of adoption work going on with the transport sector, with the agents, sale yards, to get everyone to move into this digital space. But we understand that it is a big job. It's a big change. We have got a lot of resources there to try and help deal with that change. So far, the app is, its use is increasing each month. I think we've tipped over the 17,000 download mark now, which is fantastic. And usage is definitely growing as more and more members of the supply chain sort of understand how it works. But we are definitely open for feedback and, appreciate your giving it to us whenever you can, so we know what to sort of look at for improvements for next releases, because this app's constantly being released, regularly. So please send us in your thoughts. But the only thing we would say, big takeout from all of this is, if you'd like to use the app, we really strongly recommend that you get in touch with your transporter and your receiver first, and just make sure that they're ready and able to receive a digital consignment. If they're not, there are ways that you can share the consignment digitally through the app with them, or you can print one out as well. So there's also that option. But yeah, the biggest thing to do is just talk to your transporter and your receiver and just make sure that they are ready and able to receive the app. But in the meantime, plenty of resources there, and they will all be in the post-webinar email for you to look through as well. So keep your eye out for that. I think I'll pass back to Elizabeth now. She's got some more info on the NLIS for you. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Cherie. Yeah, so I'm going to talk now about the National Livestock Identification System, and just give you a brief reminder around how it works and your requirements, and then also just touch on how eIDs work if you're new to that space with the sheep and goats. So quick note here that the NLIS system is actually roughly 23 years old. So we're actually working on the database to make sure that it's ready for the sheep and goat data come 1st of January 2025. So while it might not look different, we're actually doing upgrades in the background to make sure that it's going to hold all that data and still be useful, while we have longer term plans to refresh it in its entirety. So just a quick note on that. So with the NLIS, there's three major components to it. So one is that locations or properties are identified with a property identification code or a PIC. The second there is that all livestock are identified with an NLIS device, and that all livestock movements between locations get recorded in the NLIS database. So that's producer to producer, producer to sale yards, producer to feedlots, producer to direct to processors, and everything in between. So that's really important that those movements all get recorded, so we know where livestock are at any one point in time. It helps around that biosecurity tracing, so that if we do have a disease outbreak, we can find potentially impacted animals, and also for food safety tracing, so we can find out, well, where did that animal come from, and is there a problem on that farm that we need to go and help with that producer. So just a quick overview of the NLIS system and its components. So as I mentioned, every location that has livestock in Australia has a PIC, and all those PICs get stored in the NLIS database, which then allows those movements of livestock to happen between them. The other thing that gets stored against a PIC is actually NLIS tags. So producers actually get issued NLIS eID tags to your PIC by the manufacturer or the supplier you buy them from. So that starts that whole where the livestock are born, and that traceability starts there. So really important things around PICs. If you need something to do with your PIC updated or changed, you need to contact the Western Australian government to make sure you can update that, and that you keep your details current and correct. And if you don't renew your PIC, it can actually make everything, including your LPA, redundant. So you really need to make sure that you keep that up to date as well. The second part of the NLIS is animal identification. So this is important in around that there's currently two types of tags. So one is a visual only tag, which is just a piece of plastic. The other one is the eID tag. So the key things with eIDs is they have a little microchip in them that can be scanned when you have a handheld reader or a reader that can actually pick up what that tag has in the microchip. So ISC actually trials and approves all of these devices, and they will, if they are an NLIS device, they'll have the NLIS logo printed on them. The other thing around NLIS tags is that if they are an eID, it's absolutely only one eID per animal. If you have more than one, it won't know which one to scan, so you won't have an individual identification for the animal. For cattle, it has to go on the right ear, and for sheep and goats, it can go on either ear. In terms of colour, cattle, it's the white tags if it was born on that property, and it's an orange tag if it's lost its original white tag, and it's not on its property of birth, or you're unsure. So orange tag goes in if it's a non-breeder, so it wasn't born on that pig. For sheep and goats, in Western Australia, it's mandatory to use the year of birth colouring system, and pink if it wasn't born on that property as well. So just some gentle reminders there around the basics around sheep tags. The other things to note around animal identification in relation to eIDs, those little microchips actually have 2 numbers that get uploaded to the database. So each tag has 2 numbers. One's the RFID number of that microchip, which is a unique number that the scanner will read. The other one is called the visual ID, or the NLIS ID. I always bugger up that word. And that's got your pick in it. So if you buy eID tags, it'll have your pick in it. It'll also have the supplier's letter to say who actually supplied you that tag, whether or not it was a breeder tag for cattle, sheep or goats, or a post-breeder tag, the year it was manufactured, and then a serial number to keep it unique as well. So those 2 numbers, the manufacturer will link them together and then upload them to the NLIS database against your pick when they give you those tags. So that's sort of how eIDs work. You can actually record movements of animals using either number in the database. So that's an important thing to note too. And that visual number gets laser printed on the outside of those tags. So you can actually see your pick number in that number as well. In terms of readers, there's lots available on the market. IFC don't recommend or accredit scanners or things. They will work if they're low frequency readers as well. So they're all available for you to buy. If you don't buy in animals onto your pick, you're only selling them, you don't necessarily need to have a scanner. And most agents do actually loan them out or come and help you scan them if you want to do that as well. So that's important things just to note there as well. The third thing to note around NLIS, and just as reminders, is the recording of those livestock movements. So it is free and available to create an NLIS account, and I highly encourage you to do so if you don't have one. There are loads of little videos and little step-by-step instructions on our website for how to look at things, how to run reports about your pick, and all that sort of stuff available for you. It is the person receiving stock's responsibility to record the movements in the NLIS database. So if I'm selling sheep to Cherie, it's Cherie's responsibility to record those movements on the database. If you use an agent or a third party or have someone help you with that, that's okay. Just be mindful that you can still go in and check, and you absolutely should log into your account and make sure that that transfer has occurred, or request an upload ID from your agent to make sure that that transfer has actually been completed. If you're selling via a sale yard or a feedlot or direct to a processor, they'll do that transfer because they're the one receiving those animals. And it's really important, especially if you're using selling platforms like Auctions Plus, they potentially don't encourage that necessarily, and they won't do those transfers for you either. So it's really important to be aware of what's happening if you're buying livestock, because it is your responsibility. The other thing there is when you do complete an NLIS transfer, you can actually record the NVD serial number, and that links your NVD with the NLIS transfer, which really helps bolster and underpin that traceability between LPA and NLIS. There is interconnections between the eNVD platform and the NLIS as well, so that further goes away to connect the 2 systems and really underpin that traceability system as well. But that is where I will leave you. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew Longbottom, who's going to run you through the eID update. Hopefully build on any questions you might have in around what I've just explained. So Andrew, over to you.
Yeah, good evening. My name's Andrew Longbottom. I work for the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. I'm based in Bunbury. We go around and explain why we need eIDs in animals. So in 1st January 2025, it's going to become mandatory for all sheep producers, for all sheep that leave the property, to have an eID in their ear of one sort or another. This year, or we're bringing into phase now a discount on tags, but how it's going to work is any sheep that's already tagged with a visual tag in their ear, you leave those visual tags in their ear. If they're your sheep born on your place, you put a yellow tag in their ear when they leave after January 25. And if they've been brought in and require a pink tag put in there, then you put a pink eID tag in their, what would be the normal earmark here. So the same way you tag your sheep now to get the eIDs in the sheep. There's only one eID per sheep. If they've got an eID on their tag in their ear already when you buy them into the place, you don't need to put an eID in their tag in their ear. You just need to make sure that that eID has been transferred on the database as we have just been discussing. So after 2025, which is the white year, all sheep will be tagged with an eID. The visual tags will be phased right out. Yep. So when you start tagging off in 2025, when you sell your lambs, if you sell your black tag lambs in 2025, it makes sense to have a black tag in their ear, a black eID tag in their ear, which you'll be putting in next year. If you sell them prior to that, well, you can get away with a visual tag. Talk to your processors or your sellers, or sorry, your buyers, whoever buys your tags, to find out if they're going to a feedlot, when they're going to be out of that feedlot and all that sort of stuff. What we don't want to happen is have what they're referring to as a ghost flock. So as they discussed, when you buy an NLIS or an eID tag, it is uploaded against your pick on the database. If you sell your sheep to an abattoir that's not set up, or a sale yard that's not set up to read or scan eIDs, they'll be just done like they are now, which is a mob-based movement, and those actual individual tag numbers will never leave your property. At this stage, there's a discount on blue tags until the end of the year, which will be done at a manufacturer's level. So when you order your tags from your supplier, you tell them what you want, and they'll work out what the pick is. Because of tags, the fold over tags are a two-sided tag. You can still get on the other side, other than the 16-digit number that's laser stenciled on the outside that corresponds with the tag on the inside, that number on the chip. You can still get what you want on the other side. If you want to get your brand on it, when you get your name on it, want to get just a series of 6 numbers so you can maintain your recording, you can still get that put on the other side. If you don't get anything put on there, they're just as likely to stamp do not remove. So it's worthwhile having something on it. Up until 2025, if you can, on your weigh bills, record how many eIDs versus how many visuals you've got on there, because that way it'll make it a bit easier for everybody recording what's going on. The ewe lambs from 2023, the reason why we've put that there for ewe lambs for 2023 is that if you're hanging on to your ewe lambs for 2 years, it makes sense to put an NLIS tag in there, an eID tag in their ear this year. That way you don't have to put yellow ones in them in 2025. So everything that has a visual tag in their ear now can have a yellow tag put in their ear as they go on the truck after 2025. And the reason they chose yellow, if you order too many, they're still good in 2029 when they come back around. Next year, the talk is at the stage that they'll have a discount on yellow tags and pink tags, and most likely black tags as well. Next one. At this stage, the discount or the tag incentive program is only on fully credited tags. 2 of them are from Allflex, there's 2 from Leader, there's 1 from Shearwell, and there's a leg band for goats from Datmar. If you are buying goat tags, when you order them, actually tell your supplier that they are for goats, because as they outlined in those tags earlier, the middle 3 letters designate who makes them, what species, or whether they've come, whether they're homebred or non-homebred, and the last letter is the year that they were manufactured in. So don't be putting sheep tags in goats' ears, because otherwise they won't show up as what they're supposed to be. And that's all I have, apart from this.
Under the current national system, we track sheep and goats as mobs from property to property using property identification codes, PICs. Let's look at how we currently track our sheep and goats under our mob-based movement system. Meet Woolly. Woolly the sheep lives on River Run Farm with 630 others. Woolly is being moved to Wattle Downs Farm along with 400 other sheep. Wattle Downs Farm houses 1,300 sheep, including a few rams which the owner bought from a breeder. Sometime later, Wattle Downs decides to move a number of their sheep off the property. 60 sheep are sent to the abattoir where 1,400 others have already been delivered. 75 sheep are sent to Shady Tree Farmstead where there are already 575 head on property. 170 sheep are sent to a sale yard to be sold with 6,200 others. 500 sheep from that sale yard are moved to a feedlot, housing 8,000 more sheep. Finally, approximately 1,200 feedlot sheep are moved to an export depot where there are already 21,000 sheep. But wait, where's Woolly? Just through Woolly's potential journey, we've come into contact with about 40,280 sheep. It's at this point we find out that the rams which were brought onto Wattle Downs Farm where Woolly had been living were carrying a disease. Since we don't know where Woolly ended up, or even if she's still at Wattle Downs, we have to trace all movements of all sheep off Wattle Downs Farm through all possible paths that the disease could have flowed through. We also learned that the same breeder which sold the rams to Wattle Downs sold to 26 other properties. We now have to multiply all of these traces by 26. That's 1,047,280 potentially exposed sheep and more than 130 pathways to follow. But let's just look at finding Woolly in this instance. If Woolly had been tagged with an eID tag with a unique electronic number, we would have been able to trace her and the others from Wattle Downs as individual sheep, rather than needing to follow all the potential pathways they could have travelled down and all the other sheep they could have come into contact with. Having individual eID allows us to find Woolly. The time to contain a disease is reliant on the rate of traceability available. As a component of the whole system, eID helps us to trace specific stock and know which others have been in contact with them, improving our rate of detection, containment and response.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation, and it was great to watch the Where's Woolly video. I think it's always a really good reminder about why traceability is so important. So thanks for adding that in. It's great. So now we're at the point of the webinar where we're going to introduce David Slade to join us. David is a sheep producer in the Mount Barker area and has been using eID for the last five years. So I've got David on the call to ask just to go through a few questions just on how he's found that and what he's using it for. So welcome, David. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, hello, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I guess the best place to start, David, is why? Why did you adopt eID 5 years ago?
We adopted eID because we wanted to get a better genetic selection of our sheep, and we couldn't do it with manual reading tags because apparently if you read 100 tags, you'll never get them all right. You misread 1 or 2 tags, and it's the speed of reading too. The electronic tags eID is a lot faster to read. Stud identification or elite flock, we were breeding up our own rams as well, so we needed that as well, which we were still using. And we can identify twins, singles over the whole life of the ewe as well, whether they've been barren and this sort of thing, whether we culled them for other faults as well. Yeah, so it certainly benefits us other than off farm.
That's right. So there's lots of benefits in there. It'd be really good to get a bit of an idea just on, you know, so that's kind of why you adopted it. Do you have any sort of plans for the future, like where you think you could take the information you're getting into the future, like how you could use it?
Well, other than genetic selection on a broad scale, yes, you could do that. So yeah, and we do use it for, we can identify the shy feeders on the feedlots, where the animals don't like close quarters. They can be pulled off the feedlot. Without eIDs, you wouldn't find them. So we can pull 5% of the lambs off and put them on a broad acre scale where they do a lot better without getting sick on the feedlot. We had a situation where we were actually drenching, mineralising and vaccinating sheep, and we had a Model 500 use mix up with the Model 1000 we just already done, and the product we used on was over $4 a sheep, plus the handling of them. And we were able to just bring the auto drafter in and draft those 500 off that 1000 within 2 hours and draft them all off. And then we were able to drench and vaccinate these other ewes. Whereas if we hadn't been able to do that, we would have had to either double drench or not drench. And despite the fact we would have lost $4,000 worth of product along the way. Along the way,
yeah, wow. Incredible. So that's definitely a good value that you're getting then, is cutting back on or highlighting potential duplication of treatments that you don't have to use. Is there any other values, or like how can you quantify the value that you're getting from
other than
eID?
Our customers they don't buy our meat. We're not the provider of low cost meat in the world. We're the provider of a product of meat which is high quality and is traceable right back to the farmer if need be. And this is what our customers want. They want food security, food safety, and traceability. So, and people got to realise we don't produce the cheapest meat in the world, never will do, but we do produce. We can guarantee our products. You know, we can guarantee that the treatment records are right because it's all recorded with eIDs on each sheep.
Yeah, so you've just got that proof, that assurance that this is exactly what's been happening. It's all there on the spreadsheets.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So I guess, you know, bringing in something new will always have challenges. I wonder, have you had many challenges since implementation, or how have you overcome them?
Well, it's just as easy to tag them on the cradle. There's no problems there. We did have problems with the two-piece tag. The two-piece tags actually catch on our ring lock because the ring lock's got squares. It probably doesn't catch on when people got a plain wire, but it does definitely on ring lock. And I'll pull the tags out one after the other when sheep are grazing through the ring lock. So I just advise people to use a single-piece tag, which is quite around. We probably had sometimes with software or but that's easily solved with one phone call. And sometimes we were using the New Zealand product. We were able to phone and because we were drafting at 5 in the morning, we phoned New Zealand at 5 in the morning and asked them for advice to fix their equipment. So it's quite easily really, and we solved the problem. Other than that, we haven't got any other problems with implementing eIDs on the farm.
Fantastic. Well, that's good. So I guess the next one is just on infrastructure. So, I mean, I imagine there's the full gamut. The sky could be the limit, I guess, on this in this sort of area. What sort of infrastructure would you recommend, or, you know, for producers that are just looking to get started with this? Is there anything in particular that, you know, that you'd recommend they get?
As your previous announcer said, you don't need anything really, but I mean, ideally you should start off with a wand, and then you can go, if you've got an auto draft, you put a panel reader on it, both sides, and so you can record the sheep going through your auto drafter. You could also record them going through when you pre-test. I think when we pre-test, we record all the singles, twins, and the pre-test does that for us. Pretty easy. So if you do have a mix-up like you did like we have done before, like I was explaining before, well, it's easily, we can fix it. We can get those sheep in and draft them off straight away. We don't have to. In the past, we've had issues where we had to re-preg test 1,000 ewes because people mixed them up. So we don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah,
So
right.
we keep the gates up well. So
what have we got there, Dave? We've got a video playing
well,
from your place today.
All our yards don't have drafting. They don't have working races anymore. This is a apparently conveyor machine, which we do all our work in. And so at the moment they're doing 4 vaccinations, in fact 5, because there's a double vaccinator there as well. So and so you can tag, you can drench, and it makes everything easy for everybody. No one's getting knocked around in the sheep race, the hunting race. And we can use a labour which is untrained as well, because you can just have the people which are trained to vaccinate do that job, and the other people which is untrained labour can be backpackers, this sort of thing, can push up sheep.
Yeah. So it's saving in terms of that labour, the labour that you need on farm, definitely. Yeah. Okay.
And we got a picture of the truck there which we feed sheep in. We'll feed typically 10,000 sheep in 2 hours for that, and every sheep gets fed in a trough. So there's no wastage as well.
Yeah, perfect. Fantastic. So I guess you know, you've certainly been using this for a fair while now. Is there any sort of advice that you might have for other producers that are, you know, looking at getting started with this?
Well, you probably, if you're going to sell your sheep and you want 98% readability going through the yards when it does come in, that's what Victoria's got at the moment, you probably need to scan your sheep before they go off the farm to make sure all the tags are readable. Most of them are readable if they've got eID in. It's only a very small percentage, which is 0.2% of tags which aren't readable. So you probably need to make sure that your sheep have got eIDs in them before you go off the farm. Otherwise, you'll get charged for putting the eID in at the yard. So, and if you run through, like we weigh everything, every sheep and lamb that goes off the farm at the moment. So if it hasn't got an eID, it just get chucked into the pen, a 3-way drafter with no eID. So we just program the scales to draft off the ones without eIDs in them.
So it can, and then you can put them in. So it picks up on anyone that might have, any that have been missed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. And any tips on, you know, tags, placement of tags, or?
Well, just make sure that they're close to the ear, close to the head, more not on the end, because they tend to get ripped out more. So yeah, just make sure they're correctly applied. Make sure your gear is clean. You know, disinfect your gun. This one, keep all your tags clean and everything, and then you minimise that infection from tags put in the ear. But most people would do that as a normal general husbandry.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, look, is there anything else you'd like to add, David, before we wrap up? We're almost...
No, I'd just like to reiterate, it's so important that we get this traceability right. Because if we, up until recently, Australia was on a knife edge of traceability. In other words, if we can demonstrate to our overseas customers that we could trace our animals, and we were only just getting by the skin of our teeth, and if we'd have failed this audit from the overseas customers, we would put our markets at risk. So this just reinforces our markets. And not only that, where Woolly demonstrates it, if we had an FMD outbreak, that they would find Where's Woolly a lot quicker than the normal mob-based system. In fact, you may not even find it with a mob-based system. You've got to look through a million sheep. So when you're faced with FMD like you were from Indonesia for a while, and still is probably, well, it just reinforces our ability to get trading again, because it will be a major thing for Australia if trade gets suspended, because you won't be able to sell sheep or cows or goats on the export market until we're clear of all vaccinates and all signs of the disease.
Absolutely. Yep. No, it's certainly super important. And just that bigger picture, when you look at the bigger picture, like it's a big change for everyone to go through, but the bigger picture just is so clear that it's super important. So critical that it happens. So I think having you come along tonight, David's just been really great to give other producers some insight into your journey with this. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll send out the video recording of tonight and any questions that came up in the coming days, and resources, helpful resources to, you know, help you on your way. Integrity Systems Company is definitely here to help you, and there's the contact details there if you'd like to get in touch with us about any of the topics we've covered tonight. It's been great having you all here. Thank you for coming along. We've just popped a survey into the Q&A box there. It'd be great if you could complete it, because it would give us some really good insights into what you like, what you want to maybe hear more of from us. We feel delivering these webinars is a really important part of explaining and helping build awareness out there for what's happening. So let us know. We'd love your feedback. And just finally, before I say goodnight, well, before I go into this, but just want to thank everyone who came along tonight. It's been great having you all here. Thanks to Andrew from the WA government, David Slade. Thanks to Elizabeth, Bridget in the background helping with this, and George, Callum, Romy helping from ISC as well. So fantastic team effort. Thanks everyone. And finally, this is just to note, this is a disclaimer that yes, it is a declaration, but we can't do it for you, but we are definitely here to help. So keep that in mind and get in touch if you need to. I think that's it. Thank you everyone, and good night.